Is all about the English Reformation, or the Reformation when it got to England, and the Catholic Counter-Reformation or Catholic Reformation. You need to know that that's the same thing, but depending upon what historian is talking about it, it goes by two different names. So it's either the Counter-Reformation or the Catholic Reformation. And if you think about the meanings of those words, we have the Protestant Reformation, right? And the Catholic Reformation. Now, the Protestant Reformation came out of complaints with the Catholic Church, correct? In reaction to that, historians used to call what happened the Counter-Reformation, as though the Catholic Church was moving to counter what happened in the Protestant Reformation. In about the past 15 to 20 years, the tide has turned, and historians are preferring to refer to it as the Catholic Reformation, almost as though the Catholic Church spontaneously said, oh, look, there's some things we maybe need to look at and address. This renaming of the Reformation on the part of the Catholic Church from Counter-Reformation to Catholic Reformation is attempting to make it look like the church was not forced to react to the Protestants, but rather chose to change on its own, which is not necessarily quite accurate, is it? Okay. One Protestant sect is added in this section for you. You've already collected a few, right? You want the whole set of sects by the time you're done with the chapter. What do we have so far in our Protestant sect collection? If you guys were studying every night, this would be right there. Who's the guy who started the whole Protestant Reformation? Not Henry VIII. So how can you say that name and not immediately come up with one of the Protestant sects? Lutherans. Okay, we have Lutheranism as one Protestant sect. Calvinism. Good. Amish, but no. We don't already know about them. I'm reviewing. How about the Presbyterians? Okay. So we have the Lutherans, the Calvinists, the Presbyterians so far. And we're going to add to that set the Anabaptists. Anabaptists. Ana is a prefix that means again. So what does Anabaptist mean? Baptize again. Baptize again. Anabaptists believe in adult baptism. They believe that only an adult can choose for themselves to follow a religion, to seek salvation. Yes, sir. Presbyterian. So if Anabaptists believe in adult baptism, where do we get baptize again? Because they do still baptize children to protect them. Should they die before adulthood, you want a child baptized. But then to be an Anabaptist, you choose to be baptized again, Anna, as an adult. Okay. Some of you may have attended confirmation classes. Okay. It happens about the same age for the Anabaptists, and it is that choice as you go into adulthood. Another significant aspect of Anabaptism is religious toleration, and this didn't necessarily exist in the other Protestant sects. For instance, in the holy wars that erupt in Germany, who's fighting who? Was resolved by the Peace of Augsburg, just last section. Who was fighting who? Really? Really? Well, these quizzes will be fun to grade then. Yes? The Lutherans and the Catholics. Okay. So we know that they don't believe in religious toleration because each one is fighting to make the other one go away. The Catholics are fighting to get rid of the Lutherans. The Lutherans are fighting to defend themselves. Okay? The Anabaptists in religious toleration, what they're saying is, we don't care what anybody else is. Live and let live. Let them be. They're not trying to get rid of anybody else, to eliminate them, to tax them more, to say, no, you can't live here, you have to go live over there. None of that. Anabaptists are like, it's all good. Kind of a Matthew McConaughey sort of approach. It's all right, all right, all right. All right? Is that all right? Okay. All right. Anabaptists, this is a big one. They believe in the separation of church and state. That means you have religion over here and civics over here. Secular government completely separate from religion. This is much different than what we've had up to this point. Now, I'm not saying that we had theocracy in Europe. We did not. Many of the Islamic states have theocracies at this point in time. What Europe has is the Pope running the Catholic Church, and then kings and princes running their city-states and local kingdoms, right? Except there's a little bit of meshing of religion and state governance, because those kings and princes claimed their power by divine right. By divine right. What's divine referring to? Oh, God. I have the right to rule because it's been given to me divinely by God. Every king who claims divine right power is saying, God chose me to rule. Now, he's not necessarily saying, God came down and spoke to me, he visited me as a burning shrubbery and said, Sean, you shall be king. In many instances, it's that God somehow selected Sean's great-great-great-grandfather, and because Sean's great-great-great-grandfather was chosen, then God clearly meant for every descendant of his to be able to rule. And because Sean is the product of his father's seed, then he gets to assume the throne. Okay? So there's somewhat of a mixing of church and state going on there, right? Plus, many of the laws, even that we have today, come from a religious basis. For instance, can I just murder Joe? No. Can I go and steal Mackenzie's purse? No. Can I beat Cassidy to a bloody pulp? No. These things are prohibited. They are forbidden. And they weren't just made up by the kings and princes as each one came to power. They come to us from the Ten Commandments, from the Bible, right? So we still, even today, have a little bit of blending of church and state because those are all still present-day laws, right? Yeah? Okay, I just want to check because I've been working on a plan for Sean, but I'll just pitch that away right now then. Okay. The Anabaptists aren't really pointing at the Catholics when they decide separation of church and state. Who they're looking at the Calvinists and the Presbyterians here. Because the Calvinists, remember, they have the elect. You guys remember the elect, the ones who are pre-saved? The Calvinists live in small communities, and everything is intertwined. It's actually against the law in a Calvinist community to skip church. You're violating civil and religious law. In a Presbyterian community, the leaders of the community are also the leaders of the church. They sit on a council. Together they're called the presbyters, the leaders. And they decide the penalty for theft, both civilly and religiously. Whereas if we have separation of church and state, as we do in this country, let's say Jason here goes to St. Columkill, okay, and he gets in He gets in some hot water. He shoplifts at Target. Okay, he carries out a pack of gum, and he has to go to court for that. Okay, that is the civil punishment. And then when he goes to church, let's say his priest has heard about that, he may have some penance to do at church. Okay? Churches, even still today, can mete out punishments for parishioners who go astray. They can choose to expel them from their congregation. The Catholic Church can still actually excommunicate you. Okay? There are some modern-day carryovers from the Anabaptists, which include the Baptists, the Mennonites, and the Amish. Okay? They are modern-day descendants of that Anabaptist heritage. Okay, shall we go to England? No, calm down. We can't go any further in history unless dial it back a little bit, guys. Seriously, I don't want to stop getting so worked up. You guys are killing me today. Killing me. What just happened? Okay. This is the name of our English ruling family at the point in time that we're stepping into English history. That says Tudor. You need to know that. They're going to be ruling dynasties throughout this class all year long, and you're going to have to know them. They will appear on your finals. I am being very concrete about that. Tudor will be on your final. I could bring in heralds and strobe lights and pyrotechnics and stuff, but I would think that saying Tudor will be on your final should be sufficient that none of you will miss it, right? Yeah, I'm dreaming, aren't I, Jason? Yeah. All right. So, the Tudor monarch, when we visit England for the first time here, is a guy by the name of Henry VII. Henry VII. He came to the throne in 1485. That's not a date you need to know. I'm giving it to you for reference. Because I'm now going to ask you, what is going on in the rest of Europe in 1485? The Renaissance is going on. Does it look like dear Henry here, like his portrait artist had discovered all of the wealth of the Renaissance? It looks like his portrait artist had maybe read a few things, learned a little bit, but I kind of think the fact that his neck looks like some kind of a Star Trek alien means that his artist wasn't particularly well schooled. And that hand, that is seriously out of proportion, isn't it? It looks like he has some sort of genetic disfigurements. So we can assume that the Renaissance hasn't reached England in full bloom yet by the time this portrait is painted. Henry is the first Tudor monarch that we're going to talk about. He does a great job. He pretty much unifies England. Now let me be specific. There is a difference between England and the United Kingdom, right? England is one of 4 states within the United Kingdom. Okay? He's unified England. Henry has a number of children, but the one that matters most to him as King of England is what? His oldest son. His oldest son, who is going to be his what to the throne? Heir. How do you spell that? H-E-I-R. Very good. No to the throne, right? Okay. His heir to the throne is Arthur. Oh, what a pretty boy he is, huh? Clearly, his portrait is painted later in time than Daddy's, isn't it? You can clearly see the better use of perspective going on there. He didn't have any of those alien neck genes going on. Well, he was a very young boy. He may not have hit puberty by the time that this portrait was painted. Now, when you are the monarch of an important country, You want to secure that country's future. And one of your biggest obstacles to that is another nation that might want to come over and beat you up and take your toys, right? Well, Henry VII is going to rule England until 1509, okay? Tell me, by 1509, what changes have happened in the world? The Americas have been discovered. Chris Columbus has gone on his little trip. And so who does that make very big and powerful in Europe? Who did he sail for? Spain. Okay. So the Spanish have got all kinds of gold and silver trolling in now. What else has happened in Europe? Some crazy German priest. Luther, his 95 Theses and his treatise on the Babylonian captivity. He started the Protestant Reformation, and we also have a significant invention out there by now. The printing press. Okay. So by 1509, when Henry dies, Spain is a potential serious adversary. Henry sees this coming. By 1493, when Columbus comes back home and Spain's like, ha ha, look what we found. Not only does Henry start funding explorers of his own, but he starts making moves to work out a long-term agreement between England and Spain to protect England from Spain. Because wealth equals power, right? Can we agree about that? Wealth equals power. Universally throughout time. One of the best ways to ensure a lasting peace between nations isn't to just sign a piece of paper. It's to marry off your children. Especially if you can get one of their girls to come to your country. Because you're not going to attack a country where your daughter's living and your grandkids. You just don't do it. So Henry negotiates a treaty with a very important king and queen in Spain. You may have heard of them. Ferdinand and Isabella. They negotiate a treaty that Henry's eldest son, Arthur, is going to marry their daughter, Catherine of Aragon. And so when Arthur is 15, Catherine comes over to England and they get married. And they go off to the north of London on their honeymoon. 6 weeks later, Art is dead. This is 1502. Okay, so you've sent your daughter across the seas, she's been wed, and her husband dies on the honeymoon. What do you do, Ferdinand and Isabella? You dash a letter off to dear old Henry VII and you say, please send our daughter back home post-haste, since your son turned out to be a dud. He's dead. Right? He's a dead dud. We think maybe pneumonia. He was not a tremendously healthy, robust individual anyway. What does Henry VII say when mom and dad write and say, send our girl back home? He says, she hasn't come back from the trip. She's still in mourning. As soon as we get a ship nice enough and a captain and a crew reliable enough, because, I hate to send her back on her own without a chaperone. Could you send somebody over to go back with her? Because, you just don't put a girl on the high street. For 8 years, Henry makes excuses why Catherine can't go home again. What's he doing? He's holding her hostage, basically. Because in that time, Spain is only getting more powerful. But if your unprotected daughter is sitting in a nation in the care of the king of that nation, do you go attack? Not if you want her alive. shrewd man, huh? Now, when Arthur died, Henry has a problem, right? His heir to the throne is dead. But fortunately for him, he had not only an heir, he had also a spare. Every king wants an heir and a spare. Unfortunately for his spare, he wasn't trained to be king. Henry was 10 when his big brother died. Now, in the titled nobility, the first son gets the title, the second son goes to the church, the third son goes to the military. So Henry had been receiving a very well-rounded classical education. Art, literature, music, all sorts of great stuff. But he was not being trained to be king. And Henry will never quite get over that. He will always be a good time boy when it comes to sitting on the throne of England. He will become king in 1509. His father's dying wish, Henry VII's dying wish, expressed to the future Henry VIII, is marry your brother's widow. Marry your brother's widow. What's that make you think? Give me a one-word reaction here. Yes, go ahead and start the phones around. What does marry your brother's widow make you think? You guys all right with that? Would you marry a sibling's spouse? Why not? It's creepy. In fact, it is creepy. But what is Henry VII trying to do? Preserve the safety of England for his son to be able to rule. So Henry says, all right, I'll marry her. It's not like beyond the few weeks of the honeymoon she was actually married. Okay? But it is creepy enough that in the Catholic Church it requires specific extra special permission from the Pope in order to be able to marry your brother's widow. So Henry has to send word to Rome and ask the Pope for special permission to be able to marry his brother's widow. He does that, permission is granted, they are wed, and they are crowned together King and Queen of England in Westminster Abbey in 1509. And we will pick up there tomorrow. The fact that Henry had to get special permission from the Pope is going to be very significant to us. Okay? Do not forget that. She's quite the babe, isn't she?